Right, Peter, over to you.
Yeah.
So I'm Charlie Palmer. I run BAT, and we work with Peter to help IFAs in a generic way to get to their AI solutions. And so over to you, Peter. And obviously, BAT's got an IFA stroke mortgage broker bent, but your talk, you don't come from that industry, but your seminars today have been very interesting and helpful for all of us. So over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. There are some things that I would have had up for this presentation that it just may be slightly clunkier because I've just had to restart, but I'm sure it'll be fine. Just adding to what Charlie said, so my background is really in machine learning and AI, linked actually to Charlie's sort of Cheltenham stuff. I've worked in the defense industry, and that's where I've really practiced a lot of this, and I now just educate on the topic. So today we're going to be talking about agentic AI, which is definitely a sort of a buzzword in 2025. It's part of a series of slides or talks, sorry, I've been doing for Charlie. You may have come to them, you may have not, these previous ones. We started off with introduction to artificial intelligence and machine learning. We then had a look at what are the features that these generative AI platforms, things like ChatGPT, Claude, can actually do for us beyond just like a simple prompt. We then had a look at what goes on beyond a simple prompt. That's what deeper prompting was about. Assuming at this point in the talks, maybe you thought, yeah, this AI stuff could be good for me. You may have decided to get yourself an enterprise license. So we had a look, I think, at last time at what your enterprise options are, and the most common license a lot of big organizations use is Copilot. And now we are at today's session, hopefully, what is agentic AI, which is kind of the next big thing on top of generative AI. And then we've got one more talk in the year coming up, which is strategic AI, which is hopefully, as an individual business owner, you've been sort of taken on this AI journey, but this next talk will be looking at actually how can you bring your entire business on, how can you deal with that change management aspect. As with all of these talks, if you have a question, just ask it, just come off mute. My timings usually are all out anyway, so if you've got a question, just ask it. So what we're going to have a look at today, so really get the definitions, the foundations, what is this agentic AI thing? We're actually going to have a look at some sort of relatively advanced AI agents, actually seeing how they work. We'll have a look at a Manus demo and actually have a look at Claude Code to do some work. We'll check in on actually what is really the agentic capability we're seeing in businesses and enterprises. Maybe consider some practical use cases in sort of the IFA community where you could be using it. Have a look at actually the bigger picture of agentic AI and what it's doing for sort of the AI industry and the whole sector as a whole. And then we may speculate over what the future will look like. Let's just have a quick poll. If you wouldn't mind writing in the chat, do you think you are currently using an AI agent? And if so, could you write its name in the chat? Yeah, so Charlie's saying, yeah, we've got BAT OpenAI. So is OpenAI, is that an agent? We'll have a discussion on that. Claude, ChatGPT, SimWriter. Yeah, so we'll have a real look at actually, are these agents, Copilot? Okay, just try and see if there's any specific. Oh, the AI Builder and Power Platform, yes. AWS for BAT software. Brilliant. Okay, so we've definitely got some bits of software that we could consider agents, and we'll have a look at to what degree each of those actually possibly are sort of fulfill this agent definition. Let's have a look at sort of the generative AI journey so far, just to recap where we are. Late 2022 is when the first or the main ChatGPT model came out, ChatGPT 2023. We saw huge growth of that, 100 million users in about 2 months. 2023, business hadn't really caught up, hadn't really got involved in generative AI. They were still quite scared. There were lots of talks of data leaks. Yeah, didn't really know what to do with it, to be honest. 2024 was probably the year that enterprise actually got on board with generative AI, and according to some sources, we had 60% of Fortune 500 companies actually using Microsoft's generative AI feature, which is Microsoft Copilot. And as we've moved into 2025, we've seen this agentic shift to, rather than just using generative AI tools, we're beginning to use agentic ones, which we will define in a second. Now, what the workplace discovered sort of with just basic generative AI, you could make amazing content. You could ask it to write an essay. You could ask it to complete a report, summarize an email, summarize an 80-page document. You could ask it for some brainstorming ideas. But what are the things it couldn't do is really take actions independently. Generally, the memory wasn't there across all of your sessions. It couldn't remember what you were talking to ChatGPT about 12 months ago and use that to improve how it's going to perform today. Generally, there's a lot of human in the loop. If you were just chatting to ChatGPT, it would be back and forward, you pushing it towards your end goal, and it was limited to single interactions. So this is where agents really began to come in. So generative AI, what it is, learns patterns from massive data sets. These data sets could have text, images, or code. In fact, it's recognizing how language works, working out those patterns and relationships in that training data in order to effectively just write new text. It can write new text. It can also write new images. It can make audio as well. You interact with it via prompts. Very good at content creation, instant responses, a good sort of question answer pattern. We've already discussed its limitations. So let's actually have a get onto the agentic AI aspect. So various sources saying how big agentic AI is going to be. To be honest, these numbers are quite hard to comprehend, but we've got 2032, the AI agentic market, 90 billion versus 7 billion currently. PwC did a survey saying 80% of companies are already adopting AI agents. I dispute that probably a lot from the companies I've seen, but this is where we get back to our definition of really what an agent is, which in 5 minutes we'll have a better idea. Apparently, according to Google Cloud Financial Services, 53% of financial services firms using AI agents. And we have a figure here from McKinsey as well. I think quite skeptical, 30 to 40% productivity improvement with agentic AI. Very specific use cases, possibly areas of software engineering. You may be able to get that on specific software engineering use cases. There are other areas of business where your productivity gains will be quite limited. So any reports that you see on agentic AI really take with a pinch of salt. Okay, finally we get on to, oh gosh, what is actually agentic AI? There are a few definitions that are going around and a few frameworks, but I actually quite like Google's because it puts it in quite layperson terms. Agentic AI, you could break down to a 5-step process. First, what the AI has to do is get the mission, as in you specify the end goal that you want from the task. You do not specify the details. Actually, agentic AI doesn't work so well if you actually specify the details. You lose its capacity to sort of go out in tangents to solve a problem. So you really sort of say, what is it that you want to achieve? Then an agentic AI will scan the scene. It has a look at what context it has available to it. Does it have some documents to help it solve its problem? Does it have some web content that it can use to solve its problem? What tools does it have available to it? Does it have a coding platform available to it so it can compute calculations? Things like that. Once it's sort of assessed what the mission was, what options it has in the scene, it will then think it through. it will then run a reasoning loop to try to come up with a strategy on how to solve the problem. Okay, so that's the thinking part. Then where agentic AI sort of its magic comes is it can take actions. It can take actions to execute its reasoning step. So for instance, it can go out to the web because it decided there wasn't enough information it needed to solve the task in the context that you gave it. It then may have decided it needed to do some calculations behind the scene. So therefore it spun up a coding script in order to do those. It may have decided, a very advanced agent, actually needs to email someone, right? And it had access to the email, had a list of contacts, and actually in order to solve the task, it needed to email this person to get this information back. It could take that step. Then it has a look. What did it get back from its most recent scanning of the scene, thinking it through, taking the action? It will look at where it's got and it will observe and it will iterate back on itself. Okay, so this 5-step process defines it quite well. So what do we really mean by sort of get the mission? An example could be analyze a portfolio for tax efficiency. So you're not telling it to look for these things for tax efficiency. You're giving it a high-level mission. You may put into that the high-level objectives. You may put the scope. So for instance, you're looking at maybe a specific customer. You may give it success criteria at the end in terms of what actually do you mean by efficiency, because you do want to rein it in a little bit. And you may point out some context that you think could be helpful, but I really wouldn't make that too limiting. So give it this broad mission. You could consider the kind of thing that you may give to a third-party contractor if you were getting them to do it. You're not going to tell them how to do it, but you're giving them, this is the problem you're solving. Then what the algorithm is going to do, or the agent, is going to scan the scene. It's going to have a look for what it needs to solve the problem. So if it's looking at tax analysis, it may have a look at the portfolio holdings. What relevant information does it have maybe on tax law or data sources? May have a look at the current market conditions, have a look at that client profile. So it's really having a look at what information it needs to in order to solve that task the best it can. And now it's got to go through this thinking process. So maybe you're doing some ISA portfolio rebalancing. It's analysing where we currently are. It got that from the previous step of scanning the scene. It brought the context in. It's now having a look at what the client constraints are, because that's going to help it think through. It's now going to have a look at that tax efficiency part, which is going to be dependent on the constraints in the current position. It may decide it then needs to actually evaluate the market timing before it actually executes some sort of plan where it actually may go and do that rebalancing for you. So that's the thinking step. So far we've got the mission, scanning the scene, so having a look at what context we need and what we have. Now we're thinking through the task, and now we're actually going to take that action. Okay, we may query that portfolio or database to get the information, or to change the information maybe. We may get more of that tax information. We may actually execute some calculations, that gain or loss positions. We may actually just update the record with what we found. Okay, so this is the real part that I think takes agentic AI away from your standard generative AI, the ability to execute things in order to achieve the goal. Okay. And then step 5, a really important part, have a look where we got to with our first stab at trying to execute the goal, evaluate it. Did it meet the objectives? If not, go back to the plan, see what tools we have available to us, iterate and improve. Okay, and these agents can go on for a long time going through this step. Now you can consider there's 3 core components to AI or good AI agents. You have the model. So this is the thing, this is like your Claude Sonnet, your Claude Opus model, your ChatGPT, your OpenAI 5.1. This is that intelligent generative AI model. The tools, these are the bits that you sort of arm your model with. These are the API connections to financial data sets. These are the connections to your CRM. These are the ability to use your own computer's coding engine to execute calculations. Okay. And then you have your orchestration layer that's actually trying to coordinate all of these things together. So it's saying, well, you go out and do that calculation, you come back. You, or this model, you go out and do some web research and come back. So it coordinates everything together in order to ensure that we're getting to that final objective. And a good agent will be strong in the orchestration layer, be armed with a lot of tools, and have a fundamentally quite an intelligent model behind it. Okay. Now, because I've got a lot of stuff, I've been going through that quite quickly, but I do want to pause. Any questions so far? Okay. So 2024 ChatGPT, we've already said the general pattern was you asked a question, the AI responded, you asked another question. It forgot it had no memory between your sessions. Generally, it was only producing text, although it was producing images actually as well. You were required, the human was required at every step, and your use cases were limited. Now, the difference going to agentic AI, you set the goal. The AI does everything else. Okay. It maintains that context, that memory. It remembers what it did in order to achieve the final goal, because it may need to call upon that in its iteration stage. It can use a variety of tools. Okay, that is the really key bit. It's armed to the teeth. Can work independently. It doesn't need necessarily you to say, do this, do that. It makes the decisions on what it thinks is needed to achieve the goal. Now, when I actually wrote this slide, there's been a lot going on in AI in the last 2 weeks. ChatGPT 5 was probably quite a big thing. Since then, we've had Gemini 3, we've had a new 5.1 of ChatGPT, and we've had a new Claude update. But ChatGPT, pretty popular. Is it agentic AI? Well, let's have a look. It definitely has strong reasoning. You've probably seen, especially if you've been on these webinars before, it tries to explain how it's coming to give you the answer that it is. It's got strong reasoning. It does have tool chaining. You see it go out to the web. Sometimes you'll actually see it sort of spin up a code machine to do a calculation. So it has a few tools, even default, and you can actually bring more in. So it has that bit. Does have as well error recovery. It can go back on itself when it decides, so that's part of that iteration step. And it does actually have persistent memory. I think that 400,000 tokens, I'm not sure that's right, but actually ChatGPT now as a platform remembers context between different conversations as well. So you may note actually it seems to bring information that you were talking about in a different chat. What ChatGPT 5 actually lacks is a real orchestration layer. It will not work on tasks for ages, having this AI that is saying, go out, do this, go out, do that. And that is probably the real weakness that I would say ChatGPT 5, at least in the GUI that you use, the web interface, is truly agentic. However, there are lots of agentic AI tools available that we will have a look at in a minute. I'll just bring up this link because it's quite an interesting one. I'll just show you the graph.
While you're doing that, can you?
Yeah.
Our own. We use OpenAI just for general office stuff. You know, it seems to take long as you build a subscription and you ask questions every day. You know, it seems to take longer and longer to answer these questions. Is that just my imagination? I mean, you're only talking seconds, but you know, 5 seconds here, 5 seconds there. You start to roll your eyes and go off and do something else. But
that's a good observation. So what definitely in the last 6 months after the update of ChatGPT 4 to ChatGPT 5, what they introduced was effectively a triage of what model do we need in order to solve your question? Do we need an easy, cheap model, or do we need a model that's going to think for 5 minutes to answer it? Now, that actually introduces a latency to it. the fact it's actually got to have a small model to think about what is the most appropriate model to use for your question does make things a bit slower. Now, what that also means is that actually what you perceive to be a simple question, ChatGPT could send off to quite an advanced reasoning bot that's going to go through it many times in order to tell you something that you thought was relatively straightforward. There are ways around it where you can sort of say, just think ultra fast and it will try to instantly take it to its smallest, quickest model. But effectively what you're observing is ChatGPT saying, we want to use the best model for your task. Okay.
There is a button to say, just give me the answer now, so you can sort of stop it.
Yeah. And that will put it on for the least intelligent, quickest model, and OpenAI will probably like you for that. So in terms of our agentic capabilities, what this graph is showing is the release date of various models and how long they could work for without human intervention. And what we're finding here is you can actually have AI models working for 2.5 hours on task without human intervention. Now that has actually gone up recently, and there are artificial ways that can be extended. So just imagine setting an agent off on a task and it's actually working on it for 2.5 hours without your input. Therefore, it must have a strong orchestration layer to be assessing the information that's coming back and then redistributing tasks to achieve the ultimate goal. Okay, now we're going to have a look at some agents in action. So I quite like Mammoth, which is probably for most of us where we're geographically located, for most tasks, probably not appropriate. It's a Chinese agent framework. But what it does is it has a nice feature that allows us to have a look at how someone else's problem got solved with the agent. And what we're just going to do is once it's run, we're going to open it up and have a look at what it's doing in order to solve a task. Okay, so this was the prompt that someone put into this agent framework based in China. So you're a marketing director at Tesla, you're preparing a company profile, you need the company history and mission, market position, corporate culture, partnership opportunities and requirements. Now, what you have on the right-hand side of my screen is the orchestration layer has made instantly a to-do list, effectively. These are the things that I think I initially need to achieve in order to solve the task. And this is inside a virtual computer, so it can download things, it can take actions completely independent. So it's identified phase 1 should be to gather information on Tesla. Once it has that information, it thinks it needs to then structure a presentation. It then needs to develop comprehensive presentation context, and then it actually needs to make some brilliant looking slides. So let's have a look at what it does first. No surprise, it goes out to the internet first. Now, it probably has an internet browser stored on the computer, so it can use that. First website couldn't be reached, so it probably tries some other approach. It's managed to get onto a Wikipedia page. And it's managed to extract, and it saves this in a separate file, a separate text file, all the information that is found on Tesla. Okay. By saving it in a file is quite clever because therefore it's not going to forget it in its working context. So if this problem becomes really big and it sort of loses it in its short-term memory, it can go back to get it. So that's quite clever. It's then going out to the internet again because clearly it thought it didn't have all the information it needed to achieve the goal. More internet issues. More internet stuff, and it's updated or it's made a new file as well, Tesla research. So it's in that sort of information retrieval part of the exercise. You can now see it's ticked its to-do list. It's decided phase 1 is complete. Okay, it has all the information needed, and it now is going to move on to phase 2. Okay, So it used the model to create the presentation outline, define the key messages. It decides that point is done. So the next bit is a comprehensive presentation strategy. Created a new file. So far, I think it's created 3 separate files in the process of this. Completed that. Let's have a look. What did it need? So we're now in actually the presentation bit. So it's decided, I think, because it needs visuals on the slide, it's actually going to go out to the internet, do a web search, and actually look and try to get some Tesla logos, Tesla vehicles. This here is a computer command to actually now strip this image down from the internet. And this is decided the tool it had available to it was this command line prompt, and that's how it was going to do it. It's gone out again for some more images. It's created the presentation, and now it wants to do a final review, and we're done. And what we have at the end of it, have a look. So we don't have any logos there, but it looks okay. Mission. And this is where I think it just is a bit better than something like Copilot or some versions of ChatGPT and Claude for main presentations. It's now bringing in actually the correct images. These to me actually look like graphs that it has actually calculated. It's generated these graphs for itself from some data that it's extracted, because they have the tooltips you can see. Okay, and again, we've got a really nice presentation. So I think Manus is a nice demonstration. It's free to have a look at other people's, what they've done. I've used this one as an example of how strong agentic software works at the moment. Okay. Any questions?
So you're recommending we subscribe to Manus?
No, I'm not. I'm not recommending that. Because if you look at its terms and conditions, it is quite aligned with China. Okay, if you want to do something that is completely has nothing sensitive at all, have a play with it. But I just like it as an example framework. Now, if you were looking to sort of do real agentic stuff, I do have another example that we can have a play with on this screen. Actually, now this was a little bit more prepared before I had to restart my computer. So what we're going to do is this prompt here. Assess the impact on the NASDAQ to generate a financial report and the impact of Chinese invasion of Taiwan. I'm letting the agent know that I've installed certain tools for it to use. So it has a tool that it can go out to get stock data if it wants. I'm telling it not to rack up too much of a bill to me. Also telling it you've got some web tools to use if you want. The output, I want to be a text file and a PDF. I'm making sure it creates a clear list, and I'm telling it to be done in 10 minutes. We'll get this going and then we'll run it in the background. So Claude, I saw some people work with Claude. There is a version of Claude that you can actually run it inside your computer. Now, I'm just going to paste that prompt in and tell it to work inside this folder. Do everything inside. And we can have, what we'll do is we'll just have a look at how it's going to think. And then once it looks like it gets going, I'll carry on with the presentation. Okay, so we've got its to-do list. It's going to analyze existing research and tools in other folders. It's going to research the Taiwan political situation. It's then going to go out to get historical data for crisis scenarios using that tool I gave it, which is it can go out and get information on various shares. It looks like that's kicked off relatively fine. Any questions on what we've just seen so far with agents? And I'm just, because it's my own machine, I do have some allow buttons on how it's working, because this will take probably about 5-10 minutes to run. So I'll move it onto another screen. But are there any questions on what we're trying to achieve here?
So it's going to run an impact assessment on China's invasion of Taiwan.
Yeah.
So you could put in your own portfolio and run the same, like 20 stocks, or your client's portfolio, or your managed portfolio, whatever.
Yeah.
And okay, and get it to run the same scenario.
Yeah.
So you're sitting in front of a client and they say, well, you know, this is great, but I'm really worried about this. You say, I'll tell you what, I can give you a report. That would take weeks to do in a pre-AI, to do a report on the impact of a external event on your portfolio. Would take weeks. Amazing.
Well, obviously, and we'll go on to this, what it outputs is up to scrutiny. Has it made stuff up? But that's for, I guess, where your experience as the IFAs is to double check that, but possibly 95% of the legwork will be done. It's going through this quite quickly. I'll move on and then we'll have a look at the report when it comes back. But yeah, so that's going on. And Claude as well, an American company, and you do have enterprise options there. So I would recommend Claude over Manus. Okay. I guess this comes to your question, Charlie. Are people actually doing this? So there's been a lot of studies out over the summer on agentic AI. There's one from MIT that effectively is saying 95% of all generative AI, and that includes agentic pilots, fail. This study has been cited so many times because Wall Street effectively are uncomfortable, and this is my opinion, with how much the AI stocks are just propping up their market. They want to bring them down. The methodology behind that study was pretty poor. It was done by consultants who were looking actually to come in to actually sort of improve generative AI projects. We had a more recent study from Wharton Business School who actually showed that already 74% of AI projects are seeing return on investment, 82% of leaders using it, and 88% are planned to increase the spending. I would probably trust this one a lot more. Now, what is causing a lot of these generative and agentic AI problems to fail is poor quality data. A lot of the performance of these is requiring context, and that could be your company context, it could be your company policies. And if that's not in a good shape, these projects, these initiatives aren't going to do well. And as well, yes, we'll go on to security and compliance gaps. Generally, what seems to be working for companies who are already taking on generative and agentic AI, start small, start with that small scale problem, partner with a vendor, rarely have that strong governance and data quality to determine where you're going early on, and do sort of put in some human oversight steps. Now, what I believe is one of the problems with agentic AI is the hallucination problem. So we talked about hallucination before. That's where AIs make stuff up. Now, an agent has hundreds of opportunities to make stuff up because it's doing so many calls. It's not just doing the one back and forward. It could be doing 100. It could be doing 1,000. And each one of those has a likelihood that it could get something wrong that's therefore affecting a decision further down. Now, hallucination, so that ability for AI to make stuff up, the rates are going down and down. But obviously, if you're dealing with hundreds of them, the models do need to get a little bit better at this hallucination rate. Now, what they're trying to do more and more is ground themselves in material that they trust to reduce the chances that they make things up. But at the moment, we cannot guarantee, definitely the frontier models who are working on horizontal problems as opposed to very niche vertical problems, this hallucination problem is difficult and it just gets amplified with agents. Okay, so that's definitely a problem. We're also getting quite sort of mixed press on what agents are doing. There was Klarna, who early on in 2025 actually reduced 40% of their workforce to put in some sort of customer service agent AI. They then actually discovered that their customer service were doing more than they thought and actually had to rehire a lot of them. So some companies had sort of jumped on to agents can replace humans straight away, replace the humans before they actually realized fully what the humans were doing. Salesforce as well announced big job cuts in order to AI was going to take on a lot of the work that their humans were doing. Like I said, we've got these studies like the MIT study who are really trying to downplay the ability of agents. So there is a little bit of negative media, I'd say, around agents and job replacement at the moment. I should bring your attention actually to this interesting website here, jobforagent.com. Can I allow that?
Jobsforagent.com.
Yeah, so what it is that it's actually people who put out, you can apply, if you've got an AI agent as a software developer, people put a salary associated with getting an agent to do a task. Is it working for you, Charlie, or is it?
No, it just says can't be reached, actually.
That's working
Jobsforagent.com just says it can't be reached.
Oh, okay.
Embarrassing, isn't it?
It's a bit embarrassing. Well, at a point in the past this year, jobsforagent.com. So what it was doing is they were putting out, for instance, if you had a customer service challenge and you could put out $1,000 a month for an agent that's going to specifically complete these things. And therefore a software engineer could come up and say, actually, here's the agent, pay it $1,000 a month. I think this is jumping the gun a bit. And rarely we get down to this bottom point. The truth is at the moment, we're very much in that augmenting human ability in a lot of tasks, not all tasks, but in terms of entire job roles, human in the loop is often the best approach. Let's slip over that just for time. There was a study recently that actually just made us aware of the dark side of these agents. We've obviously had a lot of computer hacks and incidents over the summer. This was released about two weeks ago. Claude announced that the software that actually we used to generate that report in Taiwan was being used by a Chinese hacking group, and Claude Code was doing most of the hacking for them, and they were effectively just saying pick the target. And every now and then Claude Code would say, well, would you like me to do something? And they found that this hacking group were going through 30 targets. They actually managed to get through 4 of them. And with relatively inexperienced hackers, to be honest. So with these agents that have a lot of this capability, we are seeing them being used not only for productivity and be used to generate sort of GDP, they are actually obviously being used for bad practices. Okay, so that's sort of the reality of where we are with our agents. Just checking in on where our Taiwan China agent is at the moment. It's now done the report in plain text. It's now just generating that final PDF. If I go into shouldn't be long now. Just need to find where did it put the work? Let me run the PDF, Python PDF. Taiwan invasion impact report.pdf, is it that one? And we'll just have a quick look at what that did. I think it's that one. There we go. Download. We'll just go over that.
In the budget, they said they're going to create an AI growth zone in North Wales, and they're going to spend £5 million and in this AI growth zone, which is allegedly going to create 3,500 jobs, which is which is the exact opposite of what I thought AI was putting people out of work. But anyway, in this case, for 5 million, they're
Yeah.
going to create 3,500 jobs.
Um,
Sorry, just
no, this
just
is
while you
cool.
were doing while you're doing your Taiwan invasion.
So, what have we got? So, yeah, it's the right report. It was developed today. Key findings. I want to have a look at the rough steps or what it went through. So it's identifying the key companies. TSMC, obviously they make our semiconductor chips. That's a big one. Potential scenario. So this is now looking at potential military scenarios, I believe, that could happen. So naval blockade, full economic isolation, military operation. It's now having a look down the supply chain, which is obviously quite clever. We've got TSMC. We've got companies that are going to have exposure to TSMC in the NASDAQ. And it's identified the key players, NVIDIA, Apple. So seen that. Now it's doing some analysis on what the NASDAQ currently its position. AMD market. ASML, so the Dutch company who make the machines for ASML, for TSMC. That's going through a variety of stocks it thinks are important. Microsoft, Alphabet, Meta. It's interesting. So it's looking at previous events that it feels could be relevant. So what happened during the Ukraine war, what happened during the Gulf War by the look of it. Looking at the COVID-19 pandemic. I assume it's brought defense groups in because they're probably going to do well from it as well. Ooh, I don't want to comment. And then it's looking at mitigation strategies for us and what to do and some conclusions. So obviously we just scanned through that, but I'm not an expert. Is it worth me sharing this after the talk, Charlie, if people are curious on?
Yes.
But
I'm
yes.
thinking IFAs will be sacking their, all have fund managers and so on.
Well,
you might as well just run it through AI. Say, what stock should I buy? Present that to the client, but I'm not sure. If you told the client, it's a bit like Googling in front of the client. It doesn't really comes across as.
You may decide to argue with it. So you may think, actually, this is rubbish. Yeah. I'm all good. So it's worth seeing the outputs. Okay, 45 minutes. Let's press on. As a business owner, how can you get to agentic AI? So lots of you in this talk already established the foundation models. Actually, ChatGPT, your Gemini, your Claude, inside that web app, they do give a lot of agentic properties. The only thing they're rarely missing is that nice orchestration layer, but you can do a lot with them, as we've looked at the other talks. Tier 2, I would say your domain-specific agents, and Charlie's BAT software that most of us are aware, I would consider that an agent. It's using lots of different calls in order to ensure it achieves the task that you need from it. It's not just using a simple sort of single prompt, do compliance on this PDF. There's lots of things going on, lots of iteration to ensure it does it to high quality. So you have, that's obviously just for compliance. You'll find in your sector various other agents that are, I guess the narrowness of them enables them to ground their agentic behavior in more trusted materials, and they can iterate, or the agent can be advised to iterate over certain bits that may be more complicated, again, to reduce that hallucination. Your category, I'd say your enterprise no code environments. These are your Microsoft Copilots, your Power Automates. You can generate these agents relatively well with platforms that don't require any programming at all, as well. Sort of your standalone automation platforms as well, Zapier and NA10, they are, again, no code agent builders. Then getting a bit more powerful is the things that we just saw. So Claude Code, you have to have a bit of coding skill, but not much. And then finally, if you want to have a very specific, very powerful agent, you could go to your fully customized team, and you'll have to have a dev team in order to build that agent for you. So there's lots of ways that you can access agentic AI. Okay. Talk for a while. Any questions up till this point?
We're a very compliant audience today, I must say.
Good.
Other than that, or they're all asleep. Yeah, what BAT do is a very specific thing on the you upload the files into the file check system, and it basically comes up and says pass or fail. But at the moment, it just strips out all the data from those underlying files. But at the moment, that's delivering the data for the compliance officers to see. BAT is batsoftware.co.uk, which is we're the sponsor of the seminar today, and it's a system used by IFAs and mortgage brokers, mostly in the UK, not entirely, for managing their compliance. But it's quite interesting when we've refined the basic models, you know, at Claude and a couple of other places, and we've refined those models so it asks the relevant questions we want it to ask of the files that are submitted. So an average case is like 30, 20, say 10 documents, but some of them are like 50, 60 documents. So if you're doing that manually, somebody's got to sit there and actually manually sift through 50 documents. And the first thing they do is spend an average of 20 minutes actually putting them in the order. This is that sort of document, a fact find. That is the research. That is the recommendations, and that's the post-sale reports. So and that takes it's absurd amount of time. And all the individuals save all the documents in with different wordings and so on. However hard you try to get everyone to do the same thing. So that's what the BAT AI does. And that is essentially agentic.
Yeah.
But it's buried inside the systems. It's a very specific thing. You're more sort of talking about the publicly available systems, aren't you?
Yeah, but being able to understand an agentic system, therefore, gives you a better insight as to sort of BAT. It's not just sort of upload my files to ChatGPT and say check them, because it goes through these many processes. It has tools available to it, is my understanding. So, but in a very controlled, regulated way. Good. Okay. I'm going to skip this slide and actually skip the use cases slide. So the bigger picture in terms of what agentic AI is sort of doing in terms of the AI community. How did we get to agentic AI? Well, sorry. Yeah, how did we get to agentic AI? Well, first we had generative AI that was based really on, there was a key paper in 2017 from Google that introduced a single transformer architecture. That enabled us really to have things like ChatGPT and Claude. Nothing fundamentally has changed that much. There's been lots of modifications to it and it's been improved substantially, but fundamentally we're using the same sort of type of algorithms in agentic AI. But what agentic AI is doing different to generative AI is it's running so many generative AI commands. And this, when we think back to earlier this year, where we first started to see reasoning models, and there was a big, NVIDIA had a little crash because a Chinese company, DeepSeek, came out and said, well, we can actually do generative AI substantially cheaper. The market thought, well, actually, NVIDIA chips aren't worth as much anymore. But what the reasoning process, which is part of the agentic system, it demonstrated improved performance. And what this did is it meant effectively for us to get better quality AI, we're moving out of this generative AI phase where you ask one message and the AI makes one call. It will be making hundreds of calls. So instead of actually a company being able to do AI more efficiently, what it showed was you can do it more efficiently and therefore you can actually use it lots more times. And therefore, actually, we're seeing a huge demand in everything to do with AI because of these agentic systems that are using generative AI so much. Not just one call, hundreds of calls to achieve a task. And we get this thing, Jevons paradox, where actually the cost drops, which it is, the cost per token is dropping, but our usage is exploding. We're using it for more and more things. And as a result, NVIDIA has grown pretty nicely throughout the year. Serge had a question. Should a developer code everything from scratch from coding or code manually step by step? I'm a bit puzzled by that. It depends on your problem, Serge, and also who you ask. If you are coding something that is relatively straightforward, I think vibe coding, which is where you get the LLM to write a lot of it and you do some modifications, is probably okay. You're not doing anything particularly original, so therefore the LLM has seen lots of examples of how it's being done, and therefore your vibe coding is probably okay, and you can put a couple of tests in, and I think that would be fine. Where a lot of software engineers, if you're trying to write really efficient, really compressed code or solving a new type of problem with code, there you may actually just want to use your AI to help you write a line at a time, as opposed to writing large chunks of text. But my general feel, if you're not solving a particularly complicated problem, you think many developers have written this before, you could get it to generate large chunks of code and just make sure you verify the outputs. Okay. So agentic AI rarely sort of transforming the demand for AI. I think there are two ways to think about agentic AI when how it's going to transform the workplace. You could consider all of the tasks that people do and yourself that you do in your job, and you could say, well, could agentic AI do it in the way that I'm doing it? And therefore, can I almost achieve the same output just by using the agent? And therefore, you go down the line in a way of sort of job replacement. Or there's a model, a commentator in America introduced this Dr. Strange version of agents, where we try to actually rethink how roles could be completely different using agents. And the reason he's used this Dr. Strange model of agents, he used it in a marketing scenario. So let's say you're you're producing a marketing campaign. Normally one human would do that one marketing campaign. But instead, you spin up 100 or 1,000 agents to do 1,000 market campaign scenarios for you. That one person is still employed and they're still doing it. But now you've got 1,000 different agentic or agents working on this marketing campaign. They could be simulating, actually interacting with simulated customers to see actually, does it work? Does it not? And then the agents are sort of competing against each other, deciding which one seems to be best. And maybe the human gets the result of these seem to be most likely the 5 best marketing campaigns. So instead of just seeing it as, well, we could just throw one agent to do the job that one marketing campaign doing, actually, let's try to rethink how we could do our roles with agentic AI, and potentially it's the companies that go down that approach are going to be able to get these edges, really rethinking how they do stuff to be very competitive. Okay, so that's just I really think we're going to be looking from just using AI as a tool. So I use ChatGPT to you're going to be working with a team of agents. You saw how I used Claude Code to do that Taiwan report. That took 10 minutes or so. You could get used to be having many agents doing many jobs on the go. And I think that's just going to be the direction you're going to have to be going in. Persistent memory, we're already seeing this in place. There are bits of software actually that can record everything on your computer, and the reason they want to do that is to provide you with as much context for your large language model or your agent to be able to answer the problems in the way that best achieves the goal.
What's the best one for that?
Oh, I don't actually know on that one.
Don't worry.
There is yeah. And obviously there's a lot of privacy stuff and all sorts around that.
Yeah.
But But yes, that's one of the reasons AI wearables is going to be such a big thing, because the idea is that they record everything that you say, all of your heart rates, all of this thing. The companies are saying we'll give you the best agentic experience because they know you probably to a better extent than you know you, when they know that you're ill before you feel ill because of maybe your speech is slowed down and your heart rate's gone up.
Well, according to the Evening Standard, the biggest use of it in London is in nightclubs to stop people looking at their phones instead of doing whatever you do in nightclubs.
Oh.
Just standing there looking at their phones. Apparently, if they wear glasses, they can do it all. As they're talking to people, they can Google them or whatever you do.
God, yeah. So yeah, that's our persistent memory. And I think we're going to be looking at it going into an era of proactive agents. Maybe not this year, but definitely a couple of years down the line, where instead of you're saying, I would like you to produce an agenda for the following meeting, you arrive at work, the agent already knows that you have a meeting in your calendar. It's already realized you're going to need an agenda for it. It already knows that you had this customer in your calendar, so therefore it's pulled this information from your database. It's all ready for you. That as well is going to be probably where agents are going. Final thoughts and takeaway. There will still be a key human advantage. There's been a lot of papers and research around this, things like empathy and emotional intelligence, whilst there are some studies that show that machines can show reasonable levels of empathy, or at least perceived empathy. The public generally don't want them in those positions. Questions of ethical judgment and accountability are always going to remain. That ability to sort of build those relationships, especially in business, is going to remain. And yeah, regulatory accountability. So agentic AI fundamentally is different from just chat. And by the sounds of it, a lot of us have experienced a little bit of it, but it's becoming very powerful. We've got Manus, Claude Code, Copilot Studio. Success in your agent, definitely not guaranteed. And I think we're definitely in an era of augment yourself with an agent. Don't replace yourself or employees at the moment for a lot of tasks. We're definitely increase the productivity at the moment. That was me with a minute for spare. I'm happy for any questions. I'm happy to stay on for a bit longer if needed. Is it safe to connect AI agents to database or swear in my SaaS? There are ways. If you're using an API to connect to the database anyway, using an AI agent in the correct way shouldn't introduce necessarily any more security risks. I'm not a cybersecurity expert though, so do check if you have specific concerns.
Probably not in financial services, dealing with the most sensitive data, or healthcare. Or very, very careful. Super. Thank you, Peter. That's really, really good. And I think we've got another seminar back next week. Actually, it's cybersecurity this time next week.
Okay, so cybersecurity will tell you don't use agentic AI.
Protection. Yeah.
And yeah, the one strategic AI, it's going to be probably more about the human factors in terms of trying to bring in AI solutions, as opposed to these are the tools and this is what it can do.
Super. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah.
Peter, one quick question regarding the credentials to use in any social media or something. Is it safe to give it to the agent if it will be part of the workflow? Like, for example, you are building an app in anything, and part of the steps is to get into your account in Instagram and get from there some information. Is this safe to put the username and password when you are building an agent?
I see. So if, let's say, your agent is using your web browser, and in your web browser you have your logins.
as
So
part of the process.
yeah, so I know, for instance, ChatGPT, the GUI agent, it tries to prevent you doing that. Fundamentally, the agent is going to have to take the password, and it will be going off to the model. So it's as much as to how much do you trust the model provider with that password. So I think to a certain degree,
But they've got the tools to, you can put in your credit card detail, can't you, and tell it to go off and buy theatre tickets, and it will do that for you. Some of the models. So they
you're
must,
right.
well, you'd assume they're safe on that
Well, that's
basis.
that's a specific payment protocol which Google have set up. I'm not sure what I didn't think there was a specific one for what you're talking about. I would be cautious and look into the documentation, or look into the provider, drop the provider an email, and ask.
Well, the problem with the documentation is it changes every week. If you look at the latest data protection policy for any of these companies, you'll find it's no more than a couple of months old. I just find that extraordinary. So they keep changing, keep updating. So you think, well, you know, do they notify you when it's changed? No. Anyway, so nothing's 100% safe, is it? You know?
No, but yeah, I would approach it with caution, and email them if you've got any questions, I guess.
It's gone.
Yeah.
See you guys.